My name is Stuart Farnham. I am working in the Crone Lab with Jenny Pugesek, studying the nesting ecology of bumblebees. My focus this summer was to investigate the bumblebee nest survival and the proximity to a forest edge. So there are about 18 different species of bumblebees in Massachusetts, and today I will be talking about Bombus impatiens, or the common eastern bumblebee. So here she is, in all of her glory, the common eastern bumblebee. The most telling indicator of a bumblebee species is by the markings on their abdomen. There is T1, T2, T3, T4, and T5, and Bombus impatiens has a yellow marking only on T1 here, which you can see here, and then also here. They have a medium-length tongue, which is perfect for goldenrod, thistle, and pickerel weed. So when we look at what makes a bumblebee perfect for the North American climate, we can see that they start foraging before dawn and after dusk. They also forage in heavy rain, and they thrive in the cold early spring temperatures. Impatiens is one of two of the Massachusetts bumblebees that produce workers over a 5-month period here. This means that their colony sizes grow to be much larger than most other bumblebees, and at the height of a colony can grow up to 450 members. Bumblebees also use a method of pollinating called buzz pollination, where they vibrate their wings and jostle the flower and maneuver the pollen off of the flower. So here is a GIF of the buzz pollination method. You can see that the pollen is becoming airborne here, which she gathers and places in the pollen baskets, which look like this. And some of the pollen also gets stuck in her fur, which when she goes to another flower is deposited and pollination. So we know where they forage and how they do it, but what about their nesting habits? During my own personal observations, I have seen bumblebees nest in rodent dens, under stumps, and in thatches of dead grass. A UK study on bumblebees in 2008 also noted that they prefer edges, specifically linear features like fences, hedgerows, and rock walls. Jenny from the Crone Lab, my mentor, found over the summer that last summer that impatiens densities were higher near forest edges. So bumblebees seem to prefer to nest near edges, but what exactly is an edge? So this is, an edge is the meeting of two land cover types, usually characterized by a change of vegetation. So this is actually a picture of one of our field sites. You can see this is going from meadow to forest, and there's actually like a slight difference in vegetation just at the forest edge. And this could be for a couple of reasons. It could be soil composition, it could be shade cover, and it could also be just the general temperature throughout the day. Meadow to forest edges provide an exchange of resources from the forest to the meadow and vice versa. There is an abundance of life from both environments, and it's particularly interesting to ecologists because we see a unique interaction between the forest ecology and the meadow ecology. Development and agricultural intensification has fragmented meadows and forests, and so we're seeing an increase of edge areas. So we know the bumblebees prefer to nest near edges, but do they thrive there? I set out to see if bumblebees survive better near the forest edges or near the core of meadows. Because there is evidence that bumblebees prefer to nest near edges, we would expect to see that they survive better near a forest edge as opposed to the meadow core. All right, so here's the plan to tackle the question. First, we locate the nests Then we measure the distance from the nest to the forest edge using GIS. Then we check on the colonies twice a week for survival. And lastly, we analyze the data using programs Mark and R. To locate the nests, we systematically walked up and down the meadows to ensure that we covered every single meter of a meadow. What we would look for were queens and workers entering their nests. Once located, we would place a numbered metal tag next to the den site, as well as a flag so that we can easily find it from far away. Afterwards, we would use a GPS to find the coordinates of the nest site, and the GPS was accurate to within a meter. So all of our GPS data was computed using Geographic Information Systems, or GIS. Within GIS, we calculated the distance from the nest to the forest edge using satellite imagery. And all of that is accurate to within a meter based on the GPS coordinates. So when checking in on a nest, we would monitor each nest for 30 minutes. And we noted as the queens and workers entered and exited the nest. Each survey was staggered once in the morning and once in the afternoon each week to ensure that we got an accurate representation of nest activity from week to week. It was determined that nests were dead after 4 consecutive visits without any activity. In other words, if we didn't see workers or queens for 2 weeks, we would consider the colony dead. In this picture, I am conducting a survey comfortably in the rain because bumblebees don't stop working just because it's raining. To analyze our data set, we used the nest survival mode in the program Mark to test our experimental model quality by generating an AIC. In our data set, we used 11 nests from 2017 and 17 nests from this past summer, giving us a total of 28 nests in all. All right, so here we have a graph showing the daily survival rate over the distance from the forest edge of a nest. Our current data does not show a strong trend that edge effects have an effect on daily survival rate. When we compare our experimental model to the null model, we are given a change in AIC, or a delta AIC, of 1.29. And in order for our claims to be supported, we would expect to see an AIC greater than 2. So while we can't extrapolate any claims, we can notice a minor trend of survival rates as they get further away from the forest edge. Slight increase. So what does this mean? The minor trend that we see is the opposite of what we would expect. If bumblebees prefer meadow edges, then why are they doing slightly better at the core? It's important to note that the time frame of this study here is during the establishment phase of a colony, where a queen will search for a nest and the workers start taking over the duties of the colony, as opposed to the reproductive stage of a colony where the most bees are produced. Currently, our colonies are only middle-aged at this point, so perhaps edge effects are less important for this period than the reproductive stage. Overall, the other variants could have a greater impact on a colony's survival, including resource availability, predation, internal nest temperature, or how quickly a colony is able to produce workers. So where do we go from here? It would be very exciting to continue doing our research through the life cycle of the Bombus impatiens. If we were to continue looking through, we might find that forest edges produce a higher survival rate because maybe the forest shade helps regulate the internal temperature of the nest. Maybe larger rodents like groundhogs and chipmunks prefer to create their dens at forest edges, and that allows for larger colonies to grow. Or maybe resources from the forest become later available in the season. On the flip side, we could find that meadow cores are better because colonies may be less susceptible to predation. they might find there's less competition for the quality nest sites that they're looking for towards the core of a meadow, or the constant sun in the early months of colony development could make workers more productive and more likely to establish. So whatever the case may be, we can add all of these questions to the long laundry list of things we have yet to know about bumblebees. And I want to give a huge thanks to the finest mentor anybody could ever ask for, Jenny Pugesek. I also want to thank Maria Osipovich for making a Boston commute a pleasant drive and for all the hearty laughs. I also want to thank Dr. Phil Starks for being the brains of the RU program and for creating a comfortable home away from home here. And I also want to thank Elizabeth Crone for creating a place for us to explore the finer details of pollinators. Lastly, I want to thank all of the RU interns. It's been an incredible and memorable summer, and thank you all for coming today. Can I answer any questions for anybody? Yes?
So bumblebees do really well in urban areas as well as beautiful meadows.
Yes.
You're showing.
Yep.
Do you think your results would be different or stay the same with urban edges versus your forest edge?
It's really hard to say because the resources that are available are very different from like an urban environment to a meadow. I personally would expect them to do better in a meadow because that's the environment that they evolved in. We kind of talked a little bit about like ecological traps and other sorts of environments where maybe they find these nest sites near the edges because they're enticing and they aren't able to see something that could be detrimental to them. It's really hard for me to say because they are really different, and it also depends on their resources. Yes?
How large were the forest like groupings before it was actually classified as a forest? For example, if you had a collection of trees in your meadow, did that classify as a forest that had edges around it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what we did for our forest edge, initially what we assumed was that a tree has a different environment than the meadow around it. And you can kind of see that when you go out into the forest, the vegetation is different around a tree. So we use a single tree as a nearest edge, not necessarily a forest as we might think of it, where it's many, many trees for as far as we can see.
Okay. Do you think that treating a large forest the same as a single tree may have some kind of influence on your results?
Definitely. I think that when we talk about edges and the exchange of resources, the amount of resources that we can get from a single tree is far, like exponentially smaller than what we would get from a forest. So it could affect the data, but we're also seeing that different environment just around a single tree. So we wanted to incorporate that into our study just to make sure that we were being thorough.
Okay.